Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's halacha shir. It is entitled Ona'as Devorim, harmful and hurtful words, related to this week's parasha. If you look on the first box, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. In the first box, you've got the pasuk in Parashas Bahar, Lo soinu ish es amisoi. And Rashi says that it refers to two different types of Ona'ah. So that we've had one previously. Kan, here's here al Ona'as Devorim. Previously we were talking about Ona'as Mammon. That means overpricing, fraud, cheating in business. And now this one, Lo soinu ish es amitoi, the pasuk says, Rashi says, Kan his al Ona'as Devorim. What does that mean? Shelo yaknit ish es chaveiro. A person shouldn't agitate, cheper, upset his friend. You shouldn't give him advice which is wrong, which is bad, which is inappropriate, because it benefits me. And if you say, I gave him advice, I didn't really intend it badly, and of course maybe you did. That's why the pasuk says, Kadosh Baruch Hu, who knows all our thoughts, He knows. Because that needs Yirah Shamayim, that your intentions are also are correct. Now, the background to Ona'ah is very interesting. And again, I got this material on this particular shir is largely from Rabbi Daniel Rosler and also from Daniel Neustadt. And I've just put it together for tonight's shir. So the background is the Gemara in Bab Metzia and Ches on the base. The Gemara says in Bab Metzia, Mishnah, this is a Mishnah there. In the same way, like I said before, there is Ona'ah in financial dealings, in buying and selling. Kach Ona'ah b'dvarim. There's also oppression when it comes to speech, verbal oppression. Lo yomar loy b'kama chayfet zeh. Don't tell the seller, tell me how much does this cost? And you don't really want to buy it, because you build up his hopes. It's not fair. Or similarly, if the person is a bal tshuva, do you remember when? And referring to his earlier days, which he's perhaps not so proud about. Or similarly, if the person is a descendant of Gerim, your grandparents, your great grandparents, or do you remember their actions? You can't oppress the Ger either. Now, that's the Mishnah in Bab Metzia. The Gemara there says, further, give me examples, and the Gemara gives a whole load of examples. The Gemara continues and says, in a way, there are two types of Ona'as Mammon and Ona'as Devorim, and Ona'as Devorim is worse. Why? When it comes to Ona'as Devorim, verbal oppression, the pasuk says, when it comes to Ona'as Mammon, when it comes to Ona'as Devorim, you're hurting him with your actual body, or it's an emotional pain as well. But with the other one, it's just financial. Another reason why Ona'as Devorim is worse, because Ona'as Mammon you can repay. You cheated him out of a certain amount of money, so you make it up to him. But Ona'as Devorim, you can't take back hurtful words. Now, the Gemara gives, and Shulchan Aruch gives, lots of examples of Ona'as Devorim, and some of them are quite close to home, and it bears thinking about it. So the first type is asking the price of goods, going into a store and asking the price of goods when you have no intention of buying it. The Shulchan Aruch says in Choshen Mishpat Reish Chof Ches Tif Daled, Keitzad hu Ona'as Devorim, lo yoma bekama ataretz litzim chayfet zeh. How much do you want for that item? For hu ein aretz leknosa, and you don't really want to buy it. So you're giving the impression that you want to buy something, you're getting the guy's hopes up. However, it probably only applies, Rabbi Rosler says, to a seller, a sort of a private seller. Imagine you go into an antique shop, and he spent several days on the road going all over the country buying antiques, and you go into the store, and you give the impression you want to buy something, tell me how much is that thing, and you have no intention of buying it, you're just curious. So then that could be a problem of Ona'as Devorim. If you have no intention of buying it, you're getting his hopes up. But if you go into M&S, Marks and Spencer's, and you ask him how much is that item, and the person he's quite indifferent about it because he's not on commission, it's not his item, and therefore it probably won't apply. His hopes won't be dashed if you don't buy it. It could apply in some shop where there is a commission, where the assistant is on a commission type of situation. Okay, that's one area. Now another area based on the mission above is reminding someone about a past which he's not that happy about. So, for example, the Shulchan Aruch says in that same sif, which is basically the Mishnah we just quoted. Now, asking someone an answer, a question, that they don't know the answer to, is also Ona'as Devorim. It's hurtful. Don't say to the person who you know does not know the answer, how would you respond to this? So it's almost, it needs common sense and sensitivity, but there is an issa involved in it. Now, another area, which is fascinating, is soliciting funds from people who you're not sure what their financial status is. Right now, I'm in the middle of a Hasmonean campaign, so this is really halacha l'maaseh if ever there was a time. And am I allowed to WhatsApp the campaign page that I'm on to people? And if you're listening online, feel free to be in touch at j.golker@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link. But am I allowed to solicit funds from people who I don't know what their financial situation is? Because for some people it could be quite embarrassing and it's difficult. Who knows what financial situation people have? So interestingly, Rabbi Daniel Neustadt says it's not a problem. And the reason is because, number one, there's an easy come down. It's not necessarily embarrassing or painful for that person because he could, answers I've had today. I texted, I messaged someone, I've gone through my list and messaging people. And one person replied, "I'm really sorry, you're the 8th person who's asked me about Hasmonean. And my rule is I always give the first person and say no to everybody else." Okay, fine. But there easy comes down, or I'd love to help you, but I'm not in a situation to do so at the moment, or I'm committed, or whatever it may be. So it's not necessarily embarrassing, there is an easy come down. So that's one issue. And another issue is, you never really know the other person's situation. For example, you may think the person is wealthy, perhaps they're not, or vice versa. Maybe they're not wealthy, they do have money. So you never quite know a person's financial situation, and therefore, Rabbi Neustadt said it's not a problem with the Ona'as Devorim. I'm just reminded of the famous story where the president of the shul goes up to Goldstein, who's a wealthy man who's not known for giving generously ever, and he says to him, "Look, enough's enough. We've done our research, and we know you're a very wealthy person. You've got millions stashed away in Swiss bank accounts. You've got several properties. You drive this car. Your wife drives that car, and we know about the holiday homes, and we know about the yacht. So it's time for you to put your hand in the pocket and to give." And meanwhile, Goldstein's sitting there, waiting for him to finish. And then when he finishes, eventually he says to him, "But did you also find out that I have an ailing mother who needs 2 full-time carers? And did you know that I have an aunt who's in an old age home? And did you know that I've got an uncle who needs medical assistance? And I've got a sister-in-law who needs physiotherapy 3 times a week, and 2 nephews who do not have jobs, and a son-in-law who does not have a job. And if I don't give them, why should I give you?" Right? So that's the famous line. So you never quite know what the situation is. If a person, if the guy soliciting funds won't take no for an answer, then that could be different, and he persists and he pressurizes. That could be an issa, not necessarily of Ona'as Devorim, but of lo sachmid. Some poskim hold that coveting items belonging to somebody else includes their money. And so one has to be careful. So you've got to do it in a dignified way. Now that is Ona'as Devorim in a nutshell. There is also Gnevas Das, which is related to this. It's actually a machloikus what the source is. The Rambam says it's a subsection of Ona'as Devorim. The Ritva says that actually it comes under Gneva. And it's a machloikus whether or not Gnevas Das is deraisa d'Rabbanan. But Gnevas Das generally is understood to mean to deceive a person even if there is no financial implication. So the Gemara in Chulin says, also lignev das abris vafilu daite shel ovid kechavim, even a non-Jewish person as well. And this is codified in Shulchan Aruch. Also l'ramos b'nei adam, you can't cheat another person b'mekach or memker in business, or lignev daitem, or deceive the person. Kagoinim yesh mum b'mekach. For example, there's a fault in the item you're selling. Tzarich lo dia l'lokech. Interestingly, you got to tell the lokech, you got to tell the buyer. It's fascinating because in English law, there's a famous rule called caveat emptor, which means let the buyer beware. So therefore, if you're selling a house, for example, you get the guy to do a survey. You do not have to highlight in English law any problems. Let him find out. Let the buyer beware. Lahavdil $1,000 in halach is not that. It's not the same. You've got to tell them. Af imhu ovid kechavim, even if it's a non-Jewish buyer, lo yimker le bosan, you can't hide over a mum. You can't pretense, like you got to tell him this is a problem. You can't, for example, sell a non-Jewish person meat which is nevela, which is not kosher, pretending that it's shchuta. Even deceit in words. For example, I'm doing something for you, I'm not doing it for you. Don't force a person to eat with you if you know he's invited out. This extends even further. For example, inviting somebody to a Shabbos meal when you know they're invited out, or inviting someone to a chasna when you... Now, we've got, Baruch Hashem, we're making a chasna, please God, in a couple of months' time. So we've got exactly that problem, because it's just before Shiva Sabbatamas, please God, and we know there are a whole bunch of weddings that week. So we know some of our friends are making chasna that night. So we're making it on the Wednesday, Mitzvah Hashem. So we've got friends making it on the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So do you invite them to the chasna when knowing that they've got Sheva Brachos, but they can't come? Now, what if they're not dinner invitations? Then, and you want to invite them to dinner knowing they can't come, and you want to curry favor with them to say, look, that's Gnevas Das, or a Shabbos meal. So one has to be careful of that. The Shari Tshuva in the Rabbeinu Yoina says something very powerful. It's Shar Gimel Eis Kuf Pei Daled. Amar Rabbi Seinu Zichron Livracha, quoting the Gemara in Chulin. Also ligmev das habrius vafilu das nachri v'hinei hachet hazeh chomor et tzachach meYisrael. This avera of Gnevas Das is very strict in the eyes of Chazal. Yosim egezel anachri, more than thieving from them. Yan u'biyan kisfas sheke ashomer rabbo, because deceitful words is a great sin. And Chazal are very careful about the parameters of truth. Ki hum yisodei hanefesh. It goes to the very core of your soul, and it applies in lots of different areas. Gnevas Das, for example, making a full disclosure when you want to sell something. You've got to be accurate. You want to sell your car, so there could be a difference between there's one previous owner or three previous owners. Now, even if there's no reduction in value in the actual car as to whether you're the second owner or the fourth or fifth owner, it shouldn't really take away from the value of the car, but to say that there's been one previous owner sounds better than there have been three previous owners, and that could be Gnevas Das. Or a CV, a resume. A resume is another good area, another good example. The example Rabbi Roselar gave, imagine a rabbi of a small shul, he's applying to a large community, and he puts on his CV, he's the senior rabbi of that shul. It could be there's 15 members in that synagogue, and therefore, you're the only rabbi. Forget the senior rabbi. But senior rabbi gives the impression that it's a big setup, and there's 1,000 people in the shul, and there's assistant rabbi and the assistant rabbi, or whatever it is. So you've got to be honest, and you've got to be, straight. Finally, there's a fascinating tshuva of the Aseh L'Chorav, Chaim David Halevi. He had a very interesting question, which I'm sure features in some people's homes. Listen to this question. In Chelik Dalet Siman Samach Aleph. Mizeh zman ma ani noeg bebeis I'm doing something in my home which I'm not sure if it's right, and I'm writing to you, the Chaim David Halevi, to ask you your opinion. B'nei beisi einam zrizim. My family are not always so punctual. We're invited out for Shabbos meals, and we're invited, and they can't say come for 12:30, and it's 1 o'clock, and they're still not ready to go yet, and it's a bit unpleasant. We're late. You know what I did? I changed the clocks in the house to make it half an hour early, an hour earlier. Come on guys, it's 12:30 already, it's 1 o'clock, let's go, when really it's 12 o'clock or 12:30. So they invited us for 12:30 when actually they invited us for 1 o'clock. So when they rock up at quarter past one, it's nicht gefährlich, it's not the end of the world. And therefore we arrive pretty much on time. Is this okay, or is this a problem of Gnevas Das? Fascinating question. Very honest person asking this shaila. So look what he answers, interestingly. Even if your intention is to encourage your home, your family, to be on time, punctual, which you haven't actually mentioned in your question, interesting, sort of, just pointing that out. I think that your practice is actually wrong. It's not allowed. Just, and certainly if it's just to avoid an unpleasant experience of showing up late, that doesn't mean it's okay. There's one situation where it might be allowed to lie. You're allowed to lie if it's to prevent other people from doing an issa. In our situation, if you wanted to make the clocks in the house early, if it involves making the clock in your kid's room early, so that you won't miss Ksos on Kriya Shema, then maybe. Then yesh makom lahatir. But aside from the het of la frushe me'esura, it would not be allowed. So interestingly, the person writes in and he doesn't get the response he was looking for. That it would not be allowed to do that, because it would only be allowed la frushe me'esura, and just to avoid the unpleasantness, that wouldn't be enough. So just to summarize, what have we said? Ona'as Devorim is a fascinating topic. Connecting to the Sedra, Loisono, it says it twice in the Sedra. The first is Ona'as Mammon, overpricing, fraud, etc. The second is Loisono, refers to Ona'as Devorim. The plenty based on the mission in Baba Metzia and the Chesam base. Many examples of Ona'as Devorim asking the price of goods. It needs to be that you're genuinely interested in buying it, or there's at least some sort of chance of you buying it. But if you're just curious, then that would not be allowed. But that only applies to l'chora if it's the person's own shop where he has a vested interest. His hopes will be dashed if you don't buy it, or the person's on some sort of commission. Reminding someone about a murky past, or asking a question to someone you know they don't know the answer to, or inviting them to a meal where you know they cannot come. Those are examples given. Soliciting funds from people having a hard time financially, l'chora is okay because there's an easy come down, you never know their situation, and it doesn't have to be unpleasant. If you pressure them too much, there could be an issa of lo sachmoid. And gnevas das, which is either a subsection of Ona'as Devorim according to the Rambam, or it comes under the issa of gneva, that is deceiving a person even if there are no financial implications, and therefore you need to be honest and straight, full disclosure when you're selling something. CVs, etc., needs to be accurate, and that interesting tshuva of the Aseh L'Chorav, what time does it start, to change the clocks and not be straight, is L'Chora not enough of a reason just because it's unpleasant, and only La Frushim Yesura would it be okay.